You are listening to the Examine Life with Bram Levinson. So, as some of you may know about me, I don't necessarily believe that everything is random. I don't believe that nothing is for nothing. I firmly believe that whatever arises within my awareness, so whatever becomes part of what I am aware of, whether it be the most seemingly innocuous of excerpts of conversations that I might overhear as I'm walking down the street, to news bites, to things that I learn through conversations with people, to things that I read, or just general observations as I, meditate. Whatever arises within my awareness, I believe is specifically directed to me as some sort of guide, some sort of marker, descriptor, so that I can glean some meaning from it. I really spend a lot of my cognitive time understanding, or at least trying to understand, the meaning behind what seems random. This experience of, life happening versus the spiritual aspect of life happening, for me, they're not two separate things, but for many people they are. For many people, life is simply a series of random events where they have a name, they have a gender, they have an age that changes, obviously. And the details of their life are the details of their life. It is a story they are sticking to. These events that have happened in their story are the events that have made them who they are. And there is no deeper meaning behind, this is what happened, this is who I am. Boom. I firmly believe that if we focus solely on the literal and stay in the literal, we are missing a massive chunk of what is. A massive chunk of where we're meant to find the lessons, and ultimately where our higher education lies. I believe that life has, and people like to refer to it as a universe, I'll just refer to it as life, but I believe that life has an education in store for every single one of us. And as I probably have said before, we don't learn when things are good. Or at least it's extremely rare that we learn when things are good. We tend to learn when there is adversity. We learn when there is challenge. We learn when things don't go our way. We learn when things don't go according to plan or the way they have gone in the past. So whenever we are brought out of comfort, that is where we learn. And we do so through adversity. We do so through the moments that we would prefer not to have to deal with or have to live through. Yet it is in those moments where the real wisdom lies. And as I've said before numerous times, to find success on a spiritual level is to learn. It is to learn and apply the lessons that are, I guess, bestowed upon us in the moments of darkness, in the moments of difficulty and adversity. Success for me is not necessarily based on how many of you are listening, or how many people are buying a book, or how many people know my name. To be honest, I care about it because I want to get this stuff out to people on the one hand. On the other hand, I don't really care. I'm so not concerned with fame. In fact, I think fame today is probably one of the worst things that could happen to someone, but nonetheless. Well, or it can be a massive opportunity for learning, right? All this to say that the things that have happened to us in our life, I believe, have happened to us for us to glean something from these events and to learn a lesson about ourselves, and lessons that bring us closer to our higher selves. On Friday of last week, I spoke to a student who's also a friend who was talking to me about the episode of the podcast that I recorded, Conflict Resolution. And she was saying that for her, that episode had less to do with conflict and more to do with life scripts. And so I kept that in the back of my mind, and I went into the weekend, and this weekend was the second and final weekend of the Yoga Nidra teacher training that I give. And this training is basically an opportunity for me to pass on what I have learned and what I have put my own unique spin on in some aspects of the practice. And this practice is a meditation. It's deeply, deeply rooted in psychology, but it's also deeply rooted in yoga philosophy and in yoga itself. And so it's like a psychological meditation modality, very analytical meditation modality. And so it's an opportunity for me to, pass this on. I wouldn't say to the next generation, but I would say to, those who are going to continue to do this work and to bring it out into the world, into their neighborhoods and their communities, and to put their own unique spin on it. The group of people who are there this weekend are going to be using their own languaging. In some cases, they're going to be using their own language, if English is not their mother tongue. But ultimately, these teachings are meant to be disseminated out into the world so that there is more well-being, so that there is more peace in the world. So this was the second weekend of 2 weekends that comprises the training, and it was in this weekend, really, after I had given the students homework to do. They had about 5 to 10 hours of homework to do between both weekends, where we could come back together with some insight into what the practice meant for each of us and talk about it. Not surprisingly, what also ended up coming up was the beginning of the sharing of life scripts. People started to talk about themselves. They started to talk about their stories, about who they are, about who they were as children, as adolescents, what their childhoods were like, what their lives have been like, what their challenges have been, and what work they have been doing in order to make sense of it all. And something I really wanted to talk about as we got closer to the end of the weekend and the end of the training was the concept of life scripts. Because for the students, I wanted them to know that whoever they pass this meditation on to, whoever they guide, is going to be coming into their own unique meditation with their life scripts. We walk into every aspect of this life with our stories. And in many cases, we stick to those stories because those stories are familiar, because those stories give us a sense of identity, and because if we let go of those stories, then who are we? And if we let go of those stories, what do we have to lose? Now, this is a really interesting concept because for those of us who have stories that, have chapters that are less than fantastic, one would think that, it would be great to sort of detach from or unattach from or let go of the trauma or let go of the more difficult moments that we've had to endure. But remember, the human brain seeks out what is familiar and it seeks out stability. So what that means is that we have a greater likelihood of wanting to stay attached to the stories that are not fantastic than to let go of them and invite in new stories, because better the devil you know, better the devil we know. So I was passing this all on to the students this weekend and telling them, the people who come to you, your students, are going to be coming in with their stories. In some cases, you're going to be able to get a glimpse of what those stories are based on, the languaging they use, based on their posture, based on the muscular holding patterns that are in their bodies, based on their ability to relax or not. And, it's I think every one of our responsibilities as light bearers and as people who offer meditations like this and mind-body practices like this to let people understand that they are free to share or shed their life stories or to reframe the life stories. When I talk about the spiritual experience that's occurring simultaneously to the human experience, the spiritual experience almost always, if you start to understand it, almost always puts on a different spin to the life experience details. When you understand the meaning behind why something potentially may have arisen, the lessons that one can take from, the wounds or the pain that one has in one's past, all of a sudden, those wounds don't necessarily look so woundish. The pain isn't so painful. You understand that it wasn't just that. Nothing is ever just one thing. And so I was explaining to the students this weekend that the life scripts are important because they have directed us in a specific direction. Do we know whether they've happened on purpose or not? No, obviously, there's no empirical evidence. But what we do with them matters. If one story is a story of trauma and abuse and being left to feel isolated and alone and lonely and worthless, it is, I think, imperative that one put a spin on that. Now, you may say, but that's just a trick in order for someone to get through life. And I say, so what? So what if it's a trick? Do you know how many people have told me that by doing yoga, I'm just shifting my tension without dealing with it? And my answer to that is through practicing yoga, I am dealing with my tension. It's not a question of shifting it without dealing with it. I'm on that mat with my bullshit. I'm on the mat with all of the thoughts and all of the emotions and all of the events that have gone on. And that mat reflects back to me all of these things. It's not a question of escapism. It's not a question of suppression or repression. It's a question of experience and acceptance. And that's what matters. We need to understand what our stories are, and we need to welcome our stories. We need to welcome the shadow aspects of our stories, and we need to integrate all of it. But I don't think that we stop with just the narrative of the story. I think it's important for us to understand why that narrative, why that life script, or how rather that life script has brought us to here. So listen, as I've referred to in past episodes of the podcast, the life script that I have stuck to is that I grew up as a gay kid in a world where there were no gay role models, right? So the languaging I always use, which you've heard me use before, is I didn't see myself reflected back to me from the world around me. I've said this more times than I can count. And that's the thing about a life script. It's a script. You know that when you have spoken about yourself, especially your distant past, you have used the exact same words over and over and over again. Every single one of us has a life script, and we stick to it. So my life script has been that. I was a gay kid. I grew up feeling like it was okay to keep secrets. I grew up feeling very alone, that I was not okay, that I was not going to be okay, that I was going to die because of it. And because of that, I felt like I had a childhood where I had to deal with issues that were beyond my, body age. I was sort of forced to be more mature and introspective than I think I should have been at the age that I was when all this was going down. Now, if I stayed stuck in that story, I would, I suppose, fall victim to it. I would play the role of the victim, poor me, woe is me. Feelings of inferiority, constantly seeking out approval, trying to prove that, I can share my stories, I can be who I want to be, and it's not going to make a difference. And so thereby jumping beyond the script. But the truth is, the script has motivated me into the world because I knew what suffering was. At a very young age, I knew what suffering was. And let me be very clear. I had a privileged childhood. I had a lower middle class upbringing. I had a roof over my head. I always had a meal in front of me. I had parents, I still do, who loved me and love me. I've got brothers, same thing. I got a great education for as long as I chose to be in that system. So I wanted to make it very clear that I'm not complaining about anything. I understand the privilege that has been afforded to me based on the accidents of my life, of my birth. With that said, I understood suffering, hardcore understood suffering. Now, instead of having it, keep me in the role of the victim so that I continue to suffer because I stick to the script, I understand that because I knew what suffering really was as a kid, I could then go out into the world and accompany everyone who I encounter, who arises within my awareness, who is suffering. And I can let them know I know suffering. I may not know your specific suffering, but it's all waves in the same ocean. Suffering is suffering is suffering. It doesn't matter what the symptoms are. The root cause is the same. It is feeling other. It is not feeling like you can be yourself. It is feeling like there is no connection. It's feeling like you can't put your feet on the ground. It's feeling like you have no control over anything, and ultimately you are not okay. You're not enough. So for me, the spin that ended up being put on, and I don't really think I did this myself, I think it was sort of just a revelation, was that the childhood that I had was a childhood that I needed in order for me to move into the world and do what I do. Now, as my friend Sean Korn likes to say, your wound becomes your purpose, or your pain becomes your purpose. And that is, in fact, exactly what has happened with me. I believe that this is the path for every single one of us. I think that every single one of us isn't meant to suppress the trauma and suppress the shadow and suppress the darkness or shove it in a corner and call it by another name. I think we are meant to be really honest about our life scripts, and I think we're meant to share them, but I think we're supposed to jump beyond them. I think we're supposed to understand that those life scripts are diving boards that we're supposed to dive off from. into the world in search of the meaning behind them, how they can prove to be productive and effective in leaving the world a better place than when we found it. How can we affect each other on a better level? The only thing that we're not taught to do in today's world is to take care of each other. I want you to consider that. With all of the crazy that's going around, with all of the talking, and with all of the conflict, and with all of the political instability, and, the rise of the extreme right, and the retaliation of the extreme left, and with all of the bullshit that's going on, consider that the only thing that we are not being told to do by the people who have what, we consider to be power is to take care of each other. And yet I believe that's why we're here. I believe that as energetic beings, we are collaborative by nature. We are cooperative by nature. And I don't want to mean that means, I don't want to insinuate that means that we're conformative or that we are conforming by nature. I don't think that that's true. I think that a lot of people conform because it's safe. I think it's some sort of survival technique that is rooted in, who we were millions of years ago as humans. But nonetheless, I think that we are meant to be collaborative and we are meant to be cooperative because that's where and how we thrive. So I believe that every single one of us is meant to take a really good long look at the horror that we've endured and that we've lived through, and to see it not necessarily as one more aspect of this life that we just have to carry on the weight of our shoulders. It's not the cross to bear, but rather it is what informs how and where we move forward. It informs how we relate to other people. Because I think that the greatest thing that we can do with suffering is let someone else who is suffering know that we understand their pain. For someone who either is young and going through this for the first time, or a little bit older and going through it for the millionth time, the thing that we want most is relief from our suffering, right? That's why when we get ill, when we fall ill, we want to see a doctor as soon as possible because something's going on with the body, and most of us are not medical experts, so we need to defer to the experts to let us know what's going on so that we can get some relief. We want hope back integrated into the equation. So if we can offer this relief to each other, by accompanying each other, by saying to each other, you know what, I understand what you're going through. Why don't you pass your pain over to me for a second? Pass your suffering over to me for a moment. Let me carry it. Let me carry it for you. And I also believe that a problem shared is a problem halved. So if we can relate to someone on a level of I understand your suffering, and they can tell us the aspects of their life script that is just drowning them, we then have the opportunity to not only, let their problem be halved, but we also have the opportunity to spin, to help them reframe their circumstances so that they understand, this difficulty, this shame, this horror, whatever it is, isn't necessarily meant for me to just try and keep my head above water and, live as long as I can with. It's an opportunity for me to then turn into somewhat of a blessing. Let the curse become a blessing. Bring it out into the world. I know that when we do this, when we do this, events start to unfold in ways that we could never have predicted, and blessings start to become bestowed on us that we never could have predicted. Because this is the path of Dharma. This is the path of purpose. This is the path of mission. Every one of us is here for something in these bodies. And it's not to do whatever you need to do to keep your job or keep your partner or keep your body at a certain weight or to make it until vacation or to amass a certain amount of funds in your bank account. It's not that. We're here to be able to spiritually and symbolically interpret our pain and our darkness and turn it into light. Doesn't mean that we don't see it as dark, and it doesn't mean that we don't let it be dark, but we understand that nothing is ever one thing, and all it takes is a little crack. As Leonard Cohen said, all it takes is a little crack to let the light in, so that all of a sudden that monster that was under the bed isn't a monster anymore. It's actually one of our closest allies that we're meant to keep close to us. Your life script is what it is. And it continues to be written because it's a living script, right? You are still here. It is a living script. It continues to be written. But with that said, you have the opportunity to reinterpret that life script through a lens that is a lens of purpose and a lens of mission and a lens of empowerment, instead of through a lens of disempowerment and victimization and feeling wrong done by. We are not meant to be, we're not supposed to be passive bystanders on this journey. We are meant to understand that nothing is for nothing. And so what better opportunity for us to live and to, I don't want to say enjoy this experience of life, but to make the most of this experience of life, than to take the stuff that we're so ashamed of and bring it into the light under the guise of, not only do I need to speak this, but I need to bring it to other people who are going through it so that it can bring us together. I said it this weekend again, like I've said it in classes and yoga trips around the world before. You know, everything that I offer, the books and the workshops and the writing and the trips and the teaching and whatever else I do, that stuff, it's just an excuse. It's an excuse to bring us together so that we can, I guess, dismantle all of these holding patterns that we've been carrying with us in our bodies and in our minds and in our souls related to these life scripts that we've just been adhering to for dear life. We've been hanging on. I would hypothesize that these life scripts have never really ever been one thing. They have presented themselves as one thing, but they have been waiting for us to wake up to their, I suppose, alternate meaning, to their deeper meaning, to their spiritual significance. This is something that is universal to every single one of us, and it doesn't matter who you are, and it doesn't matter where you live, and it doesn't matter what your details are, what your life script is. This is one of life's great equalizers. Every single one of us has a story. And every single one of us is either going to let that story hold us hostage, or we are going to take some semblance of control over it and spin it so that it is brought into the light and it contributes. It contributes to making this world a better place. It contributes to bringing us closer to the vibration of love. And I don't mean to sound trite when I say that. The vibration of love could be the vibration of peace. It could be the vibration of contentment. It could be the vibration of connection. It could be the vibration of acceptance, because we need to accept these things that have comprised our story instead of trying to rail against them because it wasn't what we intended. Well, too bad. This shit is happening. Life is happening, and it's happening now. So what are we going to do with it? I dare you to take your life script. First of all, I dare you to examine it properly, and I dare you to welcome it, and I dare you to take all of it and share it. I dare you to start talking about it with people, and I dare you to try and understand how you can now be of service to other people and the world by bringing your experience into, I guess, the ring. How are you going to bring what you have lived to the collective? How are you going to relate to someone else who perhaps you never even would have spent the time of day on? How are you going to bring your experience to that person? How are you going to let them know that you understand? How are you going to let them know that they're not alone? How are you going to accompany someone else? Our life scripts are there for a reason. Your life script is there for a reason. And it's not meant to keep you silent and huddled and shaking and fearful. It's meant to have you stand up and roll your shoulders back and stick your chest out a little and look people in the eye and use your voice and really share what is unique to you. I know that we live in a moment where it's dangerous to be an individual. I know that it is a moment in time right now where people don't want to stick their necks out because there is a great fear, and in some cases a valid fear, of getting shot down. This is the path of the warrior. This is the path of the seer and the light bearer. You have all of this in front of you. That's why we're told what you seek is never going to come from outside of you. It's going to come from within you. You already have all this within you. You just need a little nudge. So I dare you. I dare you to take your narrative, take your story, take your life script and spin it and use it and see where it brings you. Because I guarantee you, you don't know. You have no idea what the possibilities are in front of you. But I will be waiting when this shit gets real and things start to go mind-blowingly, incredibly, like, epiphany, unbelievably, nobody told me this was possible, impressive. I'm going to be here, and I'm waiting for you guys to reach out and to let me know how this all goes for you. You've been dared. Think about it. I'll see you later. This has been the Examine Life with Bram Levinson.